3 days before my son's wedding, he called me and said, "Don't come. You'll ruin everything." I remember exactly where I was standing when those words hit me. Right by the kitchen window of my small apartment. The one with the cracked frame that I'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. The sun was setting outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Like the whole world was on fire while my heart was freezing solid inside my chest. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was trying to be strong, but because my voice had simply stopped working. My son, my only child, the boy I had raised alone since he was 5 years old, was telling me that my presence at his wedding would be a disaster, that I would ruin everything. "Dad? Are you there?" His voice sounded impatient, not sad, not apologetic, impatient. "I heard you," I finally managed to say. My own voice sounded foreign to me, like it belonged to someone else. "Can you at least tell me why?" There was a pause on the other end. A long, heavy pause that told me he was choosing his words carefully. Or maybe he was just tired of explaining things to me. Maybe he had already explained it to himself so many times that he forgot I hadn't been part of those conversations. "It's just better this way," he said. "Her family, they're different, Dad. They have a certain image. And you know how you are. You don't fit in. I don't mean that to be cruel. I just mean it's one day. One day where I need everything to be perfect. And I can't have you there making things awkward." Making things awkward. That was the phrase he chose. Not, "I'm ashamed of you." Not, "Your presence embarrasses me." Just making things awkward. As if I were some distant cousin with bad table manners instead of the man who had worked 2 jobs for 10 years so he could go to a good school. The man who had held him when he cried after his first heartbreak. The man who had sold his car so he could afford his college application fees. "Okay," I said, because what else was there to say? When your own child looks at you and sees a problem to be managed rather than a father to be honored, there are no words that can fix that. "Okay, son. I won't come." "Thank you," he said, and then he hung up. Just like that. 15 seconds after telling me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. He said thank you and hung up. I stood there for a long time after the call ended. The phone was still pressed against my ear, even though the line had gone dead. I think I was waiting for him to call back, to say he was sorry, to say he didn't mean it. But the only sound in my apartment was the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant barking of a dog from somewhere down the street. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, not crying. I had stopped crying years ago, somewhere between the divorce and the second job and the realization that life doesn't care about your plans. I just sat there in my old armchair, the one with the worn armrests from years of sitting and thinking and wondering where it all went wrong. I thought about his mother, about the day she left. She had stood in the doorway of this very apartment, a suitcase in each hand, and told me that I was too ordinary, too predictable, that she needed more than a man who came home at the same time every night and asked about her day. She wanted excitement. She wanted adventure. She wanted someone who made her feel alive. I thought about all the nights after she left when my son would wake up crying, and I would sit beside his bed and tell him stories until he fell back asleep. I thought about the school plays I never missed, even when I had to beg my boss to let me leave early. I thought about the college graduation where I sat in the back row because I didn't want to embarrass him with my cheap suit. And now this, 3 days before his wedding, and I was being erased from his life like a pencil mark on a page that someone decided they didn't like. I must have fallen asleep in that chair, because the next thing I knew, there was a knock at my door. Not a loud knock, not an urgent one, just a soft, hesitant tapping, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. The clock on my wall said 11:47 p.m. Who knocks on someone's door at nearly midnight? I thought about ignoring it. I was in no mood for company. I was in no mood for anything except sitting in the dark and feeling sorry for myself. But the knocking came again, a little louder this time, and something in my chest told me to get up. When I opened the door, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. A black car was parked outside my building. Not a regular sedan, but a long, sleek luxury car that looked like it belonged in front of a hotel or a government building, not in the cracked parking lot of my modest apartment complex. And standing in front of my door, her hand still raised to knock again, was a woman I had never met before. She was elegant. That was the first word that came to my mind. Dressed in a simple but expensive-looking black dress, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of decades. She looked at me the way you might look at a ghost, like she was seeing something she had spent years trying to forget. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice was hoarse from not using it. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out something small, an old photograph, creased and faded, the kind that had been folded and unfolded so many times that the corners were soft and worn. She held it out to me with trembling hands. I took it from her, and when I looked at the face in that photograph, the air left my lungs like I had been punched in the chest. It was me, a much younger me, maybe 22 or 23 years old, standing in front of an old building with a smile on my face that I barely recognized. I was wearing a uniform, a firefighter's uniform, and in my arms, wrapped in a blanket that was much too big for her tiny body, was a baby. The woman's hands were shaking now, not just trembling, but full body shaking, like she was standing in a freezing wind even though the night was warm. She looked at me, then at the photograph, then back at me. "It's you," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. "After all these years, it's really you." I didn't understand what was happening. I looked at the photograph again, trying to place it, trying to remember. The building in the background was unfamiliar. The uniform was familiar but distant, like a dream you wake up from and can't quite hold on to. But the baby in my arms, there was something about the way I was holding her. So carefully, so protectively, like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Who are you?" I asked. "Why do you have this picture?" She took a deep breath, the kind of breath you take before you tell someone something that will change everything. "My name is Eleanor," she said. "And that baby you're holding in that picture, that's my daughter." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Not literally, but somehow the floor of my own apartment seemed less solid than it had been a moment ago. I looked at the photograph again, then at Eleanor, then back at the photograph. "I don't understand," I said. "I've never seen this picture before. I don't remember. I was a firefighter for 2 years, but I never—" 26 years ago, she interrupted, her voice stronger now, more certain. "There was a fire at an apartment building on Maple Street. A bad one. The whole top floor went up in minutes. My daughter was only 3 months old. I was at work. I left her with a babysitter, and the babysitter fell asleep with a cigarette. I remembered. The memory hit me like a wave, cold and overwhelming. The fire on Maple Street, the screaming, the smoke so thick you couldn't see your own hands in front of your face. I had been one of the first responders on the scene. I had gone into that building not knowing if I would come back out. "I found her," I said slowly, the memory piecing itself together like fragments of a broken mirror. "She was in a crib in the back bedroom. The smoke was so thick I almost didn't see her, but I heard her crying, just barely. And You wrapped her in a blanket," Eleanor finished for me. "You carried her down 3 flights of stairs while the ceiling was collapsing around you. The firefighters who came after you said you refused to put her down. Not even when you got outside and the paramedics tried to take her. You held onto her until you were sure she was safe." I remembered now. I remembered the paramedics prying her from my arms. I remembered collapsing on the sidewalk, coughing up smoke, unable to speak for 3 days afterward. I remembered the hospital, the reporters who came to interview me, the medal they tried to give me at a ceremony I never showed up to because I didn't think I had done anything special. I had just done my job. "I tried to find you," Eleanor said, and now there were tears streaming down her cheeks. "For years, I tried to find you, but you disappeared. You left the fire department. You moved, and I didn't even know your full name. All I had was this photograph that a journalist gave me, the one he took right after you came out of the building. I've carried it with me every single day for 26 years. She reached out and grabbed my hands. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was fierce. "You saved my daughter's life. You ran into a burning building for a child you had never met. and I have spent my whole life wanting to thank you, wanting you to know what that meant to me, what you meant to me. I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning, trying to catch up with what she was telling me. 26 years. She had been looking for me for 26 years. And now she had found me, standing in my doorway at nearly midnight, 3 days before my son's wedding. How did you find me? I asked. She hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw something shift in her expression. A flicker of uncertainty, or maybe guilt. That's why I'm here, she said. My daughter, the baby you saved. Her name is Sophia. The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Sophia, my son's fiancée, the woman he was going to marry in 3 days. The daughter of the woman standing in front of me. Eleanor must have seen the recognition on my face, because she nodded slowly. You know her, she said. It wasn't a question. She's engaged to my son, I said. The words came out flat, emotionless. I was in shock. My son is marrying your daughter. Eleanor closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with a pain that matched my own. I know, she said. I found out 2 months ago. My Sophia showed me a photograph of her fiancé's family. Just a casual thing, a picture on her phone. And I saw you, standing in the background of a birthday party or something. I didn't believe it at first. I thought I was seeing things. But the more I looked, the more certain I became. She pulled her hands away from mine and clasped them together in front of her, like she was praying. I asked Sophia about you, about your family. She told me that her fiancé didn't have much of a relationship with his father, that he was embarrassed by you, that you lived in a small apartment and worked a blue-collar job and didn't fit in with the kind of people they wanted at the wedding. Each word was a knife, not because Eleanor meant them to be cruel, but because they were true. My son was ashamed of me, ashamed of the man who had saved a baby from a fire, ashamed of the father who had worked himself to the bone so his son could have a better life. I wanted to tell her, Eleanor continued. I wanted to tell her who you were, what you did for me, for her, but I didn't know how. And then, 3 days ago, I heard through the grapevine that you weren't invited to the wedding, that my daughter's future husband had told you not to come. Her jaw tightened. For the first time since she had arrived, I saw something hard in her expression, something determined. That's when I decided I had to find you, she said. Not just to thank you, but to tell you that you're coming to that wedding. Whether your son wants you there or not, whether his mother wants you there or not, you're coming. And I'm going to make sure that everyone in that room knows exactly who you are. I shook my head. No, I said. I can't. He told me not to come. If I show up, I'll ruin everything. Eleanor laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes from a place of anger and grief and love all tangled together. Ruin everything? She repeated. You saved everything. You saved my daughter's life. Without you, there wouldn't be a wedding. There wouldn't be a bride. There wouldn't be a future for any of them. And you're telling me that showing up to that wedding would ruin it? She reached into her purse again and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through it for a moment, then turned the screen to face me. On it was a photograph of a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Sophia. I had seen pictures of her before, of course, but never like this. Never knowing that I had held her in my arms when she was small enough to fit inside a blanket. Never knowing that I had breathed smoke and ash so that she could breathe air. This is my daughter, Eleanor said. The one you saved. She is smart and kind and beautiful, and she has no idea that the man her future husband is throwing away is the same man who gave her a chance at life. And I am not going to let her marry into a family that treats a hero like garbage without knowing the truth. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't that simple, that my son had made his choice, that showing up uninvited would only prove his point, that I didn't know how to respect boundaries, that I was just trying to make everything about me. But then I looked at Eleanor's face, at the tears still drying on her cheeks, at the photograph in her hands, the one she had carried for 26 years. And I realized that this wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about my son or his shame or his fiancé's wealthy family. It was about something bigger than all of us. It was about a fire that should have killed a baby. About a young firefighter who refused to let that happen. About a mother who had spent decades searching for the man who saved her daughter's life. And about a wedding where the truth was about to be told, whether anyone was ready to hear it or not. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Eleanor smiled. It was a small smile, fragile but real. "Come to the wedding," she said. "Wear your best suit. Sit in the front row. And when your son looks at you like you don't belong there, remember that you belong there more than anyone in that room." The next 3 days passed like a dream. I barely slept. I barely ate. I spent most of the time sitting in my armchair, staring at the photograph Eleanor had given me, trying to reconcile the young man in the firefighter's uniform with the old man I saw in the mirror. On the morning of the wedding, I put on the only suit I owned. It was old and slightly too big for me now, but I had it dry cleaned and pressed until it looked almost new. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time, straightening my tie and smoothing my hair and wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Eleanor had sent me the address. The wedding was being held at a country club on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place I had only ever seen in movies. When I pulled into the parking lot in my 15-year-old sedan, surrounded by luxury cars and limousines, I felt like an imposter, like a janitor who had wandered onto a movie set by accident. But I got out of the car anyway. I walked up to the entrance anyway, and when the wedding coordinator looked at me with confusion and asked for my name, I gave it to her and watched her face go pale when she checked her list and saw that I wasn't on it. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "You're not on the guest list. I can't let you in." Before I could respond, a voice spoke from behind her. "He's with me." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, wearing a beautiful silver dress that matched her hair. She was not alone. Behind her stood a group of people I didn't recognize. Older men and women, some in suits, some in uniforms. Firefighters, several of them. And in the center of the group, an elderly man with a chest full of medals that glittered in the morning light. "This is the man I told you about," Eleanor said to the group. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking again. "The one who saved my daughter's life. The one who ran into a burning building when everyone else was running out." The elderly man stepped forward. He was old enough to be my father, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He looked at me for a long moment, then extended his hand. "I'm Chief Morrison," he said. "I was the incident commander at the Maple Street fire. I've been looking for you for 26 years, son. The department wanted to give you a medal. You never showed up to receive it." I shook his hand, too stunned to speak. Behind me, I could hear the wedding coordinator stammering something about seating arrangements and guest lists, but no one was listening to her anymore. "We're here to make sure you get what you deserve," Eleanor said quietly. "Not a medal, not recognition from the department, just a seat at your son's wedding, and the chance for everyone in that room to know the truth." The ceremony was about to begin. I could hear the soft strains of music drifting out from the main hall. Somewhere inside, my son was standing at an altar, waiting for his bride. His bride, whose life I had saved before she could even walk. His bride, whose mother had spent decades searching for me. His bride, who had no idea that the man her fiancé had uninvited was the reason she was alive at all. I took a deep breath. I straightened my tie, and with Eleanor on one side of me and Chief Morrison on the other, I walked into that country club and took my seat in the front row. The wedding didn't go as planned. That's the only way I can describe it. When my son saw me sitting there, his face drained of all color. I saw him whisper something to the groomsman next to him, probably asking how I had gotten in. But before anyone could ask me to leave, Sophia walked down the aisle. She was beautiful, even more beautiful than her photographs. She walked arm in arm with a man I assumed was her father, but her eyes were fixed on my son at the altar. She didn't see me at first. None of them saw me. I was just an old man in an old suit, sitting in a seat where I didn't belong. But then the ceremony ended. The vows were exchanged. The rings were placed on fingers. And when the officiant announced that the couple would now be introduced as husband and wife, Eleanor stood up. "Wait," she said. Her voice cut through the applause like a blade. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at her, including Sophia and my son. "I have something to say," Eleanor continued. She walked to the front of the room, her silver dress shimmering under the lights, and turned to face the crowd. "Before we celebrate this marriage, before we eat and drink and dance, there is something every single person in this room needs to know. My son's mother, my ex-wife, was sitting at a table near the front. I saw her lean over to the person next to her and whisper something, probably something about Eleanor making a scene. But Eleanor wasn't making a scene. She was telling the truth. She told them about the fire, about the babysitter who fell asleep with a cigarette, about the apartment building that went up in flames, about the 3-month-old baby trapped in a crib in a smoke-filled room, about the young firefighter who ran into that building when no one else could. And then she pointed at me. "That man right there," she said, her voice breaking. "That man saved my daughter's life. He carried her down 3 flights of stairs while the ceiling was collapsing around him. He refused to let go of her, even when his lungs were full of smoke and his legs could barely carry him. He is the reason my daughter is standing here today. He is the reason any of us are here today." The room erupted, not in applause but in murmurs, whispers, gasps. People turned to look at me, this old man in an old suit, and I saw something in their eyes that I had never seen before. Respect. My son was staring at me. His face was unreadable, a mask of shock and confusion and something else, something that looked almost like shame. Sophia was crying, not the delicate, careful tears of a bride on her wedding day, but the messy, uncontrollable sobs of someone who has just learned something that changes everything. She looked at me, then at her mother, then back at me. "Is it true?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but in the silence of that room, everyone heard her. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I forced myself to stand. "It's true," I said. "I didn't know it was you. Not until your mother showed me that photograph 3 nights ago. I didn't know that the baby I saved was the woman my son was going to marry." Sophia walked toward me. She was still crying, but she was smiling too. When she reached me, she grabbed my hands the same way her mother had grabbed them 3 nights ago, and she held them like she would never let go. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for saving my life." My son walked over too. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at me, looking at his new wife holding my hands, looking at the room full of people watching us. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked. His voice was quiet, almost childlike. "Because I didn't know," I said. "Not until 3 days ago. And by then, you had already told me not to come to your wedding." He flinched like I had slapped him. And in that moment, I saw something crack inside him. The walls he had built, the pride he had wrapped around himself like armor, the shame he felt about his ordinary father with his ordinary life. It all started to crumble. "I'm sorry," he said, and then louder, for the whole room to hear. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. Not yet." But I nodded, and I let him hug me, right there in front of everyone, while his bride held my hands and her mother cried tears of joy and the old fire chief with the medals on his chest saluted me from across the room. The wedding reception went on as planned. But it was different now. People came up to me all night, shaking my hand, asking me about the fire, thanking me for my service. My ex-wife avoided eye contact with me, but I saw her watching from across the room, her expression unreadable. My son stayed close to me for most of the night, like he was afraid I might disappear if he looked away. And at the end of the night, when the last guests had left and the staff was cleaning up the tables, Sophia came to find me one more time. She was holding the old photograph, the one her mother had carried for 26 years, the one of a young firefighter holding a baby in a blanket. "I want you to have this," she said, handing it to me. "You're family now, and family should never forget where they came from." I took the photograph and looked at it one last time. The young man in the firefighter's uniform stared back at me, smiling a smile I had forgotten I ever had. And in his arms, wrapped in a blanket and safe from the flames, was a baby who would one day grow up to marry my son. Life doesn't always give you second chances. It doesn't always let you rewrite the endings of your worst moments. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you something better. It gives you the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, has a way of setting you free. I drove home that night in my old sedan, the photograph resting on the passenger seat beside me. The sun was rising over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel ordinary. I didn't feel like a man who had been left behind or forgotten or thrown away. I felt like a hero, not because I had saved a baby from a fire, but because I had shown up, because I had refused to let shame and pride and fear keep me from the truth. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk into a room full of people who don't want you there and let them see who you really are. My son called me the next morning. He didn't apologize again. He didn't try to explain or make excuses. He just asked if I wanted to come over for dinner that weekend. I said yes. And that, I think, is the real happy ending. Not the medals or the recognition or the standing ovation. Just a father and a son, sitting down to dinner, trying to find their way back to each other. One meal at a time.